Welcome to another episode of Straight Out of Politics. I'm your host, Compton J. And on today's episode, the last several weeks, I've been really intrigued, interested in mainstream media's coverage of the so-called labor shortage. So I've literally watched, over 50 videos of just local newscasts in almost every state, or I would say maybe 43 states, where they're talking about the labor shortage in their local area, and just the framing of it was something that I noticed and I wanted to discuss on this next episode. So we'll be talking about the so-called labor shortage. We'll also be talking about the ruling class reaction to the labor shortage. We're going to start though with mainstream media's coverage of the so-called labor strike. And then we're going to end it with a discussion on whether this so-called labor strike can kind of be twisted and manipulated into a general strike, which we'll get into. I don't want to start the conversation right now, but we'll get into it in just a moment. But I do want to bring on my two guest co-hosts today, and we have a returning guest, Liv, from last week, and we have a new guy or a new comrade today. Andrew joins us. Also, both of them are from the Populist Voice Network. I think one is on the independent left, the other's on actually both of you are on the intersection.
Yeah.
And Andrew is the host of the independent left on the Populist Voice Network. Make sure you check out both of their podcasts. Very, very good. How are you two doing? Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm great. I always get butterflies right before I come on your show. I love it. I'm so excited to be back. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And Andrew, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. Can't complain too much.
Awesome. So before we went live, we were kind of talking about the videos I sent to everybody because I wanted to talk about some of the mainstream media's coverage. And Andrew's comment was there's a lot to unpack in this first video, which is true. So I'm going to start out with probably one of the worst videos of the ones we're going to be playing today. It's an interview. It's an interview with a capitalist, and he seems to be very ticked off. But it's filled with propaganda. But let's go ahead and bring up the video. Let's bring this into the stream first here.
Thing to be in. I'm blue and you have a blue background.
Hang on.
This is color coordination by coincidence, not by design, of course.
All right, let me set the video up a little better. I didn't know it was going to play.
How bad is that banter?
Yeah, so this is some sort of, I think it's a web newscast, or maybe it is a local newscast, and he has on this gentleman that is talking about the labor shortage and also just analyzing it from his perspective, what's going on. So I thought it was a great look into the ruling class and how they view this. So now let's go ahead and roll that video.
Mark Skousen, editor-in-chief of Forecast and Strategies, joins us today to talk about Biden's proposed $6 trillion budget as well as the jobs report that came out this morning. Mark, welcome back.
Good to be back. It looks like blue is the thing to be in. I'm blue and you have a blue background.
This is color coordination by coincidence, not by design, of course. Mark, you are an esteemed economist. You're a professor at Chapman University. I wanted to bring you in to talk about macro and what's going on right now, specifically in regards to the unemployment rate. It's gone down to 5.8% in the latest reading that came out just this morning. It's the lowest level since the start of the pandemic. How you were
Okay, I'm gonna have to do this only because I just can't let these people say some of these things and go.
Just spare us, Jed. Just spare us.
So one thing everybody needs to understand about propaganda, in particular mainstream media propaganda, is what they did in this video. What do they do in the setup? Here is an expert. So everything he's about to say is obviously the truth. Yeah. And what did he say about this? He's an esteemed economist. and he works at Chapman University, which is actually not too far from where I am, maybe a 30-minute drive in the city of Orange. So that's what this guy. So this is what they do. They tell you up front, oh, this person's an expert in global economy. Oh, this person's an expert in terrorism. Oh, this person's an expert in whatever it is, so that whatever he's going to say afterwards, you obviously have to take as true. So now let's get back to the video.
Interpreting this, are you optimistic now that the unemployment has gone down lower? Now, remember, of course, 559,000 jobs were added, but it still missed estimates of around 675,000.
Yeah, I think actually this is a deliberate policy by the Biden administration to encourage labor shortages, and to actually the reason the federal government is offering these very generous unemployment compensation of $300 a week and so forth is to force employers and firms to raise wages. You know, they had a.
Okay, yeah, just so what I want to say about this last little section here. At first, I think there was several Freudian slips in what he was just about to say, about he was just about to say how they're trying to force labor back to work. And that's actually what his real perspective is. But this is something I haven't heard a lot of, where he believes the Joe Biden administration is doing something intentionally to force employers to have to drive up their wages. I guess he doesn't know who Joe Biden's donors are. That is absolutely absurd. Before I restart the video, did the two of you want to kind of interject also on some of the things he's said so far?
Oh, gladly. I think going back to your first point that you made when it came to, setting it up for propaganda, let's just talk about this guy's history, because I did a little Google search, which I found very interesting. He was an economic analyst for the CIA in the early 70s. He also was a consultant for IBM and Hutchinson Tech. And in the early 2000s, he served as the president of the free market nonprofit Foundation for Economic Education. Guess who their number one funder is? The Koch brothers, right? So I think this just adds a little more that this is a so-called expert they're going to have that to basically claim that this person is trying to be objective, when really he is funded by hyper-partisan sources giving you this information and saying things like forced labor. So I thought that's just something also to add to the whole propaganda that they're using.
I think that is such a great point. It's such a telling point also that this is another thing, mainstream media. So it turns out this video is also there. This episode is also going to be about breaking down propaganda. What you're saying, how this media source doesn't divulge any of this information.
No.
You get what I'm saying? They just say he's an expert, or I forget whatever phrase they use.
Esteemed economist.
Yeah, he's an esteemed economist. Nothing about the Koch brother connection. Nothing about any of these things that is clearly slanted. He's not looking at the economy from an unbiased point of view, just simply examining it. He's looking at it from a perspective of the oligarch, of the ruling class, saying, this is how I view what needs to happen. This is how I view what is going on. But let's get back to that video. Let's see where it's at here. Let's add it back in. Sorry.
A big push to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and that's not getting through Congress. So indirectly, they're getting the $15 wage increase by the labor shortages and by forcing employers to have to provide higher wages, more benefits, whatever it takes to get people to get back to work. And so I think it's a very clever, sneaky way to raise wages. And so the unemployment rate is down to 5.8%, and the number of new job creation is relatively slow. So that will just encourage more wage increases, more bonuses, everything they can do to help the union workers. They're very, very pro-union. So I think that there is a method to their madness, if you will. But the other side of it's going to cause higher inflation and eventually higher interest rates. So that's the negative side of this policy: higher labor costs, shortages in a variety of products, higher energy prices. There's lots of higher food prices. This is all causing inflation to move higher and eventually will cause interest rates to rise.
Okay, Mark, you mentioned that there's a shortage of labor. How is that possible right now? We're still at, above pre-pandemic levels of unemployment. There's still, I think, 6.7 million or close to 7 million people unemployed. And it's going to take roughly a year, people estimate, before we bring it back down to pre-COVID levels. So where is this shortage? How can we observe this?
Yeah, it's in job openings. Job openings are increasing dramatically. They just can't find the workers. And the reason they can't find the workers is because they're sitting at home collecting these checks from the state and federal governments. And so they lack the incentive to go back to work.
This guy right here, I don't know what to say about it, but you could see the disgust on his face about the unemployment insurance. Like, these capitalists, they have a deep-seated core belief in, like, work is your duty in life. Like, they really genuinely believe that for us, not them, not the oligarch, not the ruling class, that we're supposed to view work as this some sort of like benevolent thing. Like, we have the freedom to work almost. And it is so offensive to their psyche, to their way of thinking, that somebody can sit home and get money. But they don't say anything about their trust fund kids who just sit home and collect money. It's like it's the same. I don't understand the difference. Liv, I want to bring you in. Did you want to chime in
Sure.
so far on what this guy has been saying so far? So
wow. Well, I think he's giving the Biden administration way too much credit. They are not that smart to come up with anything. And I'm always skeptical at people who are presented as experts that are products of the capitalist, white supremacist-based patriarchy. So I like I told you guys before, I was like, I made it like 5 minutes in this video, and I was like, my stomach is like disgusted. I cannot take this. And so, no, people are refusing to go back to work. These essential workers that were, prized at the beginning of COVID are now like, because the federal government, the bare minimum of giving us the federal increase for UBI and giving us 2 stimulus checks. So that's the bare minimum. And now people are like, this is, as I said on the last one, like the bubblings of the general strike. People are like, no, I am not going to tolerate that bullshit that I put up in the food service industry, in the customer service industry, in the retail industry. I am done putting up with that shit for bare minimum wage. I'm done. And at this point, it's also not even, I think people are at the point where it's like, you know what, that livable wage isn't even good enough. I want free healthcare, because that's a lot of money that takes a chunk from my wages. And people are really starting to get in and be like, I am demanding this from the capitalist society. Right. And I would really like to mention that I don't know if he ever got, this is like a 25-minute video. I don't know if he made this point in the video, but I would like to note that over the past few decades, CEOs average salaries have been steadily but surely skyrocketing.
Skyrocketing.
Skyrocketing. So I would like to talk about that if you want to talk about how we can get some incentivize people to work, is where we take the money from and who we disperse it to.
Absolutely. I agree with every single thing you've said there. Let's see if we can get through a little more of this video, because believe it or not, the main point of why I wanted to play this video, he hasn't gotten to yet, but it's just so much to cover. But yeah, let's finish this video here.
So employers have to raise wages. They're offering bonuses like $500 if you sign here. I mean, it's like baseball players or sports figures. And I think it's a deliberate policy. I really do, to get a work around the minimum wage legislation that's being stalled in Congress.
I think something interesting that might support your theory is that I think the labor force participation rate went down. I was reading that the labor force participation rate went down as well. So for the viewers out there, that reading basically indicates how many people are in the labor force. So the unemployment rate is calculated using that pool of people. So why is it that people are not putting themselves in the labor force as much as before? Is that because of the unemployment, $300 a week unemployment checks?
Yeah, I think that's basically what's happening here. And there's also a disconnect a little bit between training and ability and what is in demand right now. I mean, demand for engineering, demand for technology, demands in finance and so forth. These are rising rather dramatically, and you may not have the skills available. So there may be a disconnect there as well. But the unemployment rate of 5.8% going down sounds like a really good statistic, but all it is reflecting is people looking for jobs. And if the labor participation rate is dropping, that suggests that people are dropping out because they aren't looking for a job. And why should they look for a job when they get paid more to sit at home than they do working for a company and have to pay taxes and that sort of thing? So,
again, how many times have they hit this point? Nothing about the pandemic, nothing about childcare, nothing about people not really some people not really believing in the vaccinations, or even people believing in the vaccinations but understanding that the vaccinations will only prevent you from dying. You can still catch some of the variants. Like, there's so much in why people aren't returning to the labor force. But how about this? I worked in the restaurant industry for several years. It's an awful existence. Yep. How about that? Like, how about people got an opportunity to stay at home and not be in this vice of working paycheck to paycheck, and they got to say, you know what? That existence is not something I want to live. I don't want to live where I'm working 50 hours and I don't have enough to pay all of my bills. I don't want to live where I'm working 52 weeks in a year and I don't have any paid vacation. I don't want to work in a place where they tell me overtime is optional, but it's clearly not optional. Like, I've had work like that before, and I'm going to just go on a tangent here. And it's done all over America, where they're forcing people to do overtime, but they're claiming that it's voluntary. So at one point I was working in a warehouse. I forget which warehouse. And this warehouse, it was 99% immigrant workers, 99%. And so the way they treated the workers at that place was ridiculous. Like, clearly you're treating these people this way because they're immigrants. And it was like, oh, overtime Saturday and Sunday. And then I was like, oh, will you be here? I was like, oh, no, I'm not coming in. It was like, what? Mm-hmm. I was like, no, isn't it voluntary? I was like, yeah, it's voluntary, but you know. I was like, no, I don't know. Is it voluntary or is it not voluntary? It's voluntary. Then I said, I won't be here. I didn't last at that job that much longer, to be honest with you. So the point I'm making is there's all types of awful treatment happening at these jobs. So why would anybody say, hey, after this pandemic, let me rush back to those jobs who you called essential workers, but the pay what you weren't paid as essential workers, why would they want to go back to that? Like, Andrew, I'll ask you that question. Why would anybody want to go back to that type of existence after being off and understanding now, like, that is just not the existence I want to live? Your thoughts, Andrew?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you would, if you were continuously getting exploited, and I think you finally got a taste of what it's like to kind of relax and actually think, and kind of reflect, then I can see you'd be like, why would I want to go back into that environment where I get no benefits, no healthcare, no and being told that I need to be staying overtime, right? And I think it's really interesting that you mentioned the restaurant industry, just because. So I work in higher ed, and I work for a college that primarily specializes in healthcare, and I'm a career development coordinator for these students. And I can't tell you how many times I've had employers in the healthcare industry even come to me and being like, we are like so understaffed. We need students so bad. And that, they're offering like these little bonuses because of that. And, I think another thing, like the healthcare industry, so many of these jobs in the healthcare industry, particularly hospital jobs, they do a lot of good. They are very much needed, but they also get exploited. So I think you're starting to see the same thing over there where, people are like, why would I be going to that, right? And you could talk about how hospital workers are striking because of unsanitary conditions and all of that. So yeah, I think it all kind of intersects in that way.
Oh no, I can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
I'm sorry. You couldn't hear me. I had my mic off.
Gotcha.
So what I was saying is, my apologies. I had my mic off. What I was saying is, I don't understand this economic system where you treat workers like terrible, and the industries that are hurting the most are the industries that treat some of the workers like the worst. And I don't understand why you don't understand they're not coming back in droves.
Yeah.
That's the part that I don't get. So let's get back and let's finish this video, because we do have another video to go. But
I think it's a terrible policy, and this is why so many state governments are now reneging on the $300 a week payment, basically trying to force people to get back to work.
The Republicans in the Senate have been trying to repeal this $300 a week unemployment check for quite a few months now. Are they making any progress? Are they? Is that going to happen, or do you think that's just going to be a gridlock?
Yeah, no, it's the House that's in control by the Democrats and by Nancy Pelosi, and they seem to be all together on this issue. No, it's on the state level that they're withholding. They're basically saying no more $300 a week checks and get back to work.
Okay. Now, do you think that okay? So you're theorizing that Biden's policy is deliberately causing a shortage so wages would go up. Are we observing wage pressures right now? Do you think it's happening right now, or do you think it's happening sometime down the line?
Oh, no, it's happening right now. We're seeing more companies raising the minimum wage even beyond $15 an hour. And so I think these statistics will start coming out in the next few months. And it's going to force companies to raise prices. The demand is there. All the free money that the federal government is putting out there is resulting in higher demand for goods and services, for food, for energy, and so forth. The economy is getting back in terms of activity, in terms of consumer consumption is rising. But the job market is where the disequilibrium is taking place, and it's until people really get back to work. I think we're seeing more money chasing fewer goods. I actually see a period of stagflation that is developing. Even the Biden administration, in their $6 trillion budget, are assuming that it will result in a 1.8 real economic growth rate, GMP, real GDP rising on average over the next 3 years of 1.8%. Well, that's even less than what the Trump administration economic growth rate was, which was over 2%. So that suggests a rather slow growth in.
Oh no, your audio again, Jay.
I can't take that guy anymore.
Thank you. I can't stand it.
Yeah, I can't take it. So I the point that I was trying to make with showing that video, he goes into another diatribe of just trying to say just a bunch of just BS about workers and how they're just basically lazy. And I don't understand these capitalists. Like, what person says I'm getting $1,000 from here and I'm getting $500 from here? Let me pick the $500. Like, it's not about wanting to be lazy. It's about saying, hey, I have a stream of money coming in that is allowing me to pay more of my bills than before. Yeah. So why would I, you know what I'm saying? Why would I do that? It's not like, oh, I want to, they think that workers are at home, toasting, like we're getting free money and like, you know what I mean? Like we're just having parties and smoking it up. It's just absurd. But Liv, it sounded like you wanted to chime in. Go ahead. What did you want to say there?
Oh, well, I've seen some comments. Communism or COVID? Yeah, let's go. Someone make it up. Capitalists are trying to kill us. They're trying to force us back to work. And last time I checked, we have not eradicated COVID yet, and it's still very much a threat.
Yes.
This is not fucking free money. This is survival money. And I would also like to mention that he didn't fucking talk about all the millions of people like myself who have been applying for unemployment for over 6 months and have not seen a dime of it yet.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that system and how fucked up that is. Because if I wasn't enrolled in grad school right now, let's tell you a little story of how I learned about at-will employment and how that is a thing in America. I had never heard of that. I was working this job as a COVID-19 contact tracer, and I started grad school at the same time. I have bipolar 1 disorder, and I got and at the same time, I moved into a new place. I adopted my puppy that I was training to be a service dog. I was really overwhelmed, and I ended up just being terminated from that job for underperforming, and I was just told, one day I got a call, and I was told that was it. It was, you're being terminated for underperforming, and this is at-will employment. This is what we can do. And I was like, at-will employment? Like, what is that? Because that's up to that point, I thought it was a law that you had to give 2 weeks notice to leave a job. I had never heard of at-will employment. Otherwise, I definitely would have left that job that I had quit and gave 2 weeks before. I had never heard of, So I thought 2 weeks was like a general thing, or at least giving warning was, a general courtesy. But no, at-will employment is a thing. And it gives employers the right to terminate you at any given time without any notice. And that's exactly what happened to me. And then I wanted to pursue it because I was like, look, I was really depressed. Like I'm dealing with my bipolar disorder, and I was blamed for not telling them that I have a disability, and therefore they did not need to accommodate me, and they did not need to they could do at-will employment and just fire me at will. And I have been applying for unemployment since November 17th, not seen a dime of it. And the only reason I am even living right now is because I am enrolled in grad school and I'm going through loans. And otherwise I wouldn't be living right now. I mean, I have my family, thank God. But
my question, Liv, and that experience that you speak of is an experience that a lot of people went through the pandemic, and it also this is what I'm saying. Like, why do they think people, let's say for example, you didn't come from this industry. It's almost like they feel like if you're unemployed, it doesn't matter what field you're in. If there's a job, it doesn't matter if it's paid $7.25. If you're unemployed, you should have that job. Like it don't matter. Like if that's not your field or anything like that. Like who cares? Like they're just assuming 9.3 million job openings that are open, and the people who are not filling them want those jobs. And mainstream media's coverage of it, I guess let's kind of bring it back to that topic. Mainstream media's coverage of what they're calling a labor shortage is never really addressing the issues. They kind of just go, it could be, they want to make sure it's the unemployment. They're either only will single out unemployment, or they'll make sure that's the number one thing they say. And then they'll mention a couple of other things. And then they just proceed to go into a pity party for the business owner. Well, tell us, how hard has it been? Well, tell us this. There's no genuine like wanting to know why are people not going to these jobs. It would make more sense to me that there is a labor shortage. You go to the labor and say, why aren't you taking these jobs? But instead you're going to the employer, and the employer, they're skipping over, oh, we have competitive pay. Oh, we raised our wages. And I think this is one of the videos I'm going to be playing for you. There was this one guy who said, I raised my wages. We pay well. He proceeded to go into how much he paid. And this is the point I want to make. You can't go off what these capitalists are describing when they say competitive wages, when they say we pay good. Because he said, this is a restaurant, right? He said, we pay $8 an hour. That's what he said.
What?
He said, we pay $8. He said, for a tipped employee, we pay $8 an hour, and the government only requires us to pay $5. Yep. And to him, that was an example of how he was such a great employer. Mm. Yep. So it is a complete lack of understanding of labor, and a lack of wanting to understand a labor. But I want to bring Andrew in on what are your thoughts on any or all of what we've been talking about before I get into that next video.
Yeah, so let's just take this guy, I'll just call him this Coke man, right? Because he's talking about a Coke man. I don't care about his name at this point. Let's just take him at his own logic, right? The free market, it's all about competition, right? The most competitive will rise to the top. Okay, then why are you whining that you're paying less than the government, right? The government is your competition. You're losing. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, right? So I find it really interesting and hypocritical that they talk about competition, they talk about the free market, but if the government happens to be giving more money, $300 a week, right? First of all, if you can't beat $300 a week, I don't know what you're paying.
Exactly.
But then you start whining and start saying, well, people aren't trying to work. We can't get workers. Like that just, I find very laughable. And, of course, nobody is going to call that out in the mainstream media. And, it was interesting. This was maybe a little over a month or two ago when obviously the labor shortage was starting to happen. CNN actually had this restaurant owner on who originally was getting like barely any applicants. Right. And then he decided to be like, you know what, I'm going to give you a good amount of support for your tuition. Right. I'm going to give you health care. All of a sudden, overnight, he went from virtually no applications to like over 30, 40, 50. Right. So that just shows like people by default aren't lazy. If you give them actually incentive, if you show people like, oh, I actually give a shit about, your future and I'm here to support you with that, then people will come. As the saying from The Sandlot goes, if you build it, He will come.
They will come.
They will come. In this case, it's plural, yes. But so, I mean, I think that kind of is my main takeaway is like use your own arguments for working class people and realize, oh, the government's beating me. What can I do to beat the government? So
exactly. I think your point is a great one, and it also illustrates the lack of them doing that. Andrew, illustrates how they're not really about competition. They're not really about capitalism. They're not really about the free market. Capitalists are the ones who want the free market the least because they want the market rigged towards them. Yeah. They just want to give all of those capitalist, things that they teach in school. They just want that to apply to us. It's the same thing with Wall Street. Who are those guys who came in? Reddit guys who came in, like they don't want that. They want it. Congress needs to do something. You need to investigate. You need to investigate this when they're doing the same thing you're doing. Yeah. So again, they don't want competition. They just want the game rigged. But let's bring in this other video. This one is a lot shorter. Thank God.
Happening at airports
let me restart that actually. A lot shorter video.
Hundreds of flights have been grounded as American Airlines sees a strain on its operations.
And the travel trouble is expected to get worse over the busy summer season. Local 10's Christina Vasquez is live at MIA to explain what's causing these cancellations. Christina.
Industry analysts tell me one factor underpinning these headlines of canceled flights are labor shortages happening at airports across the country. Now that air travel is rebounding, a new problem on the horizon: staffing shortages across the airline industry. Hundreds of American Airlines customers over the weekend faced canceled flights, which the airliner attributed to both weather and labor shortages with some vendors. American says depending on operational need, they may cancel at least 50 to 60 flights a day system-wide for the rest of June and between 50 to 80 flights per day in early July. Adding, quote, customers are able to receive a full refund when the scheduled change is more than 4 hours from their original departure time. TSA, which earlier this month marked a milestone moment, surpassing 2 million daily travelers screened for the first time since March 2020, hosting hiring events across the country, and some cases offering new hires a $1,000 recruitment incentive.
TSA said that they would hire 6,000 new agents. However, they've been able to hire about 3,000. We think that it's highly impossible to hire the remainder before this 4th of July holiday.
Also hiring? Take a look. Aviation support provider Yulin America at MIA.
Staffing has been a very big challenge here. It's probably our largest challenge.
Director of Operations Bill Kilduff says they are looking for baggage workers, cabin cleaners, and ticket checkers, offering a $1,000 sign-on bonus and $200 referral incentive.
We're looking for just anybody that wants to work. We got over 100 positions.
Vacancies they hope to fill at 2 upcoming job fairs.
There's a job for everybody that wants one.
And you can learn more on how to apply for jobs that are available right now at Miami International Airport on our website. That's local10.com. Reporting live for you from MIA, I'm Christina Vasquez, Local 10 News.
All right. So this video about the airline industry being affected by the so-called labor shortage. What I noticed in most of these videos, these local newscasts, is, like I was saying, they don't use it to really understand what's happening in the labor shortage. They kind of use it to promote the employer.
Yeah.
Like so many of them will end, hey, if you're looking for a job with any of the companies, go to our website and blah, blah, blah. And just imagine if mainstream media did this for workers. Yep. If they said, hey, that's $7.25 an hour, that's terrible. And they did stories like this over and over and over about employers not paying adequate amount of money. The point that I'm making is it just feels like mainstream media is acting as an advocate for these corporations that are not paying adequately enough. Now, you might be saying the average person might be looking at some of these incentives. Wow, $1,000 incentive. Wow, $200 referral. Those are one-time payments.
Yep.
This is the reason why they can offer that. Those are one-time payment. They'll pay you $1,000 up front just so they don't have to pay you $18 an hour.
Yep.
You get what I'm saying? Because $1,000 up front, what does that do for your rent 7 months later? It doesn't do anything. So they're offering a bunch of stuff that seemingly is not working.
Yep.
And it's all to avoid the one thing, and that's paying more in labor. So what I want to go to both of you. I'll start with Liv. What is your reaction or your thoughts on the airline industry being affected? Like literally, for example, in LAX, they're canceling over 100 flights every single day. They're canceling over 100 flights every single day just simply because they don't have the staff. So what is your reaction to that, Liv?
Not once in that video did they mention that part of the reason of that labor shortage is because there's been a skyrocketing increase in unruly passengers, which is a direct result of our government's incompetence with the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic and our lack of consistency with especially mask guidelines that have led to the unruly passengers, which have led to all people in the airline industry and all labor to say, fuck this shit. I am so done.
Right.
And I'm out. And as we've said in the comments, like 15 is not a living wage. And as Nick said in our last episode, no, we don't want living wages. We want thriving wages. We want to be consistent with inflation and compare with other really well-developed nations.
Right.
We should be comparing ourselves to them. We should be at least talking a minimum of $25 an hour. Minimum. We should be fighting for that and not settling. No fight for 15. None of that bullshit.
And what about the employers that can't? Because this is what they love to use. They love to use small employers as a scapegoat or as the cover for what they. So in other words, when Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi are talking about small businesses, that phrase, I guarantee they're not talking about the same type of small businesses that we're talking about. No. We're talking about the cleaners at the local, at the corner cleaners in the local neighborhood. They're talking about a venture capitalist. I said it the right way the first time. A vulture capitalist is also considered a small business, which I didn't know. So small businesses to them literally means just the number of people, not the revenue. So you could be a small business to Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell and make $5 million a year. To me, that's not a small business. You're not making $5 million a year. So the point that I'm making is that what do we do with those small businesses when we're talking about $25 an hour, Liv? You mentioned we should have this, our pay rate should be this. Yeah. So what is your response to those people? Oh, what about small businesses, the mom and pop? What do we do with them? What is your answer to that?
So as we've been talking about, like we talked about last week, with BLM, we want systemic change. Workers want systemic change. So this is not a one solution fits all kind of thing. This is multiple things. This is raising the minimum wage. This is free healthcare. This is getting rid of billionaires with a heavy wealth tax and eating the rich and deleting the elite. We have money. Defunding the military, abolishing the police, defunding the police, redistributing funds to community and social programs. Like the money is there, the workers are there. It's all about how the capitalists are controlling it and redistributing the funds. Like the money is there. Like talk about promoting jobs. Like let's talk about a Green New Deal and how many jobs that's going to make. And not only how great that's going to be for our planet and humanity, but how great it's going to be for our economy. Right. If you want to be the economics about it and not care about humans, sure. Like think about the economy.
Absolutely. And I'm going to bring in Andrew for your comments on this. But my point is this, is that it's awful. Like I'm a small business owner. It's awful. Small businesses, close, for whatever reason. But that is the nature of capitalism. If you're not, it's the strongest survive. And what I want to say about small businesses, the mom and pop and minimum wage, labor's value or how much labor is paid should not be determined on which employers can afford it. That's absurd. That would be like saying your freedom is determined on which states would allow you to have certain freedoms. Like that's not how it. That's not. Excuse me. That's not how it works. So if labor is valued at $25 an hour, if that's the value of labor, if you can't pay that, I'm sorry, you should not be in business. If I can't pay it as a small business owner, that means I should not be in business and I have to go do something else, or maybe create some other business that generates more funds where I can pay an adequate living wage. Because if we base labor off what the employee or employer can pay, we have the situation that we've had in the United States for several decades. So, Andrew, what are your thoughts on any or all of that? And also, how should the ability of an employer be factored in to how much labor is paid?
Yeah, so I think first of all, and I saw a couple comments regarding this, so I think it's a great point that I want to elevate. You know, we subsidize big businesses. The government, we don't. The government subsidizes big business all the time. Amazon gets subsidized all the time, and studies have shown that this actually kills small businesses around them. And so I think it's important that we can subsidize the government can subsidize small businesses as well in order to help, right? And I think that's a great way to ensure that small businesses are giving people a dignified and living wage, while also ensuring that this small business can thrive, because I think it's obviously small businesses are very important, right? We don't want this country to be run by 4 corporations, right? We're almost there. We're almost there, but we still have a little bit of time to slow that down, right? Hashtag anti-monopolies. But so I think that is another thing that brings attention that no one talks about. You know, if you care about small businesses, you should talk about subsidizing that as well. And I think in another point in terms of paying people a decent, dignified wage that they deserve, right? That was the second part of your question.
Absolutely.
I mean, absolutely. I think it's, you know, anybody who is working should be able to afford to live in a home. They should afford to live food, right? And it shouldn't be the case. And I mean, they should, I think, and so that's, I guess, my overall.
Gotcha. You didn't want to go too deep into that, but I get what you're saying there, but what I want to add to that, and that is, it feels like in the capitalist system, what we're taught in school, it doesn't feel like I can't point to any real life applications of what you taught me in school. You know what I'm saying? Hey, you just work hard. Hey, you just, anybody can start a business. It doesn't feel like just anyone, it doesn't feel like just anyone can start a business. So when we have these companies, these corporations, these mom and pops that are starting these businesses, our government has to stop subsidizing them, because like what you're saying, subsidizing them, giving Amazon a tax break, giving Google, a tax break, what does that do to the mom and pop? And why does Google and Amazon need a tax break in the first place? Like cities and states were falling over themselves when Amazon was looking to build a new location, and everybody was offering no taxes. And it's like, how absurd is that? Like, how desperate are you that you're not going to require taxes? What is that depriving those citizens of, those tax dollars? Like, what is that depriving them of? Let me bring up this next video, actually. Now, this next video, the interviewer actually says, hey, you got to pay higher. But what I want you to pay attention to is the response to this, to that person saying you need to pay people more money if you want them to come in. So here we go here.
Perspective, I think, of the job market from your perch there as CEO of Manpower. And what are you seeing right now in terms of business confidence and hiring going forward? Because at least in the U.S., we know the job market is very strong right now.
And that's actually true also across the world. In most of the countries, certainly in the developed world, we're seeing unemployment at decade lows, and especially in the U.S., of course, at a 50-year low. Yeah. So the labor markets are healthy. Employment is high, unemployment is low. Wage inflation, generally speaking, though, is still relatively muted. So, every country thinks it's a country-specific issue, but it's actually a structural issue. It stays around 2.5% to 3% wherever you look, even when the labor markets are very tight. But the labor market...
The first thing I want to say is we have to challenge terminology when these people talk. They're framing. Wage inflation is ridiculous. There's no such thing as wage inflation. Labor is paid what they're supposed to be paid. So let's continue with the video.
On the whole, are still very robust, and demand for workers is still strong.
So, Jonas, I got to follow up on that. I hear CEOs whining, quite honestly. We can't hire people. We can't. And then you say, well, wage growth is so tepid. Hello? Is there a disconnect? Don't these CEOs and these companies just need to pay people not just a little bit more, but a lot more to get people to come work at these companies?
Well, a big driver for wage inflation has to be productivity increases. And as you want...
I heard the sigh.
I didn't like this guy either.
Well, okay.
It's so ridiculous. So basically he's saying wage inflation, which basically means increased wages, has to be tied to increase productivity.
Well,
are these people insane? You're underpaying me for my current productivity, and then you're saying I have to produce more for you to pay me adequately. How absurd is that? Go ahead, Andrew. Like you were gonna say something.
I was just gonna say, like, if only I could just talk to this person face to face in series of reactions. But like, let's talk about productivity. Since the mid 70s, productivity has increased like around 72.2%. While hourly pay of typical workers has essentially stagnated. So yeah, maybe this last year, productivity hasn't increased that much, right? Because it's a fucking year. But like, if we're going to use his logic against him, where it's like, we shouldn't raise the wages because of productivity hasn't raised, how about factoring in productivity for the last 40 to 50 years and then raising the wages accordingly? But no, you're not comfortable with that number, because that would be well above $15.
Right.
Yeah. And not ready for that conversation.
Right, and that's kind of my point. Let's see what else this guy has to say. I'm gonna back it up just so I can hear him say that ridiculousness again.
These companies just need to pay people not just a little bit more, but a lot more to get people to come work at these companies.
Well, a big driver for wage inflation has to be productivity increases. And as you well know, across the world, we've not seen significant boost in productivity, which means you can't really afford to pay wages that are much higher. So that will be...
So notice what he says. So that means you really can't afford to pay if productivity doesn't go up. So he's basically saying if they don't make any more money, they can't pay you more, which is absurd. So what capitalists are trying to do, an oligarch and a ruling class are trying to do, is say what we're paying you now, which is less than what we should be paying you, you're producing at this level, right? So they're not saying, hey, we're underpaying you, so let's raise it to now we're paying you adequately. They're saying, yes, it's underpaid, but if we're going to pay you more, you need to produce more. And again, this particular point has a direct connection to slavery, that ideology of You need to produce if you want this. You need to produce more if you want that. That has a direct connection. Remember, American capitalism, the greatest success is slavery. The greatest labor, what do they love to use? Labor costs. The greatest time for capitalism and the lowest labor costs was during American slavery.
Yes.
So that is the basis of how they think. That was how they, okay, that's how we want to do it. That's how we want to do capitalism. The bare minimum for labor. And that's why the focus on labor in the United States, even in capitalism in general, there is a focus in labor. But if you view capitalism in other countries, it's not this laser focus like this. It's not this capitalism profits over people no matter what. That's unique to the United States.
Yeah.
So Liv, I'll let you jump in here. Any comments on any of that, all of that, part of that, anything else you want to add
again,
there?
this guy, if you watch the whole video, he doesn't again once comment about the skyrocketing increase of CEOs and their salaries, which is, I have one from the Economic Policy Institute. CEO compensation surged 14% in 2019 to 21.3 million. CEOs now earn 320 times as much as a typical worker.
320 times. Now, did those CEOs do 320 times productivity? That they're in productivity?
I would like to see that.
Like, it's absurd. Yeah, it's absurd. And Andrew, did you want to also comment on any or all of that before we move on to the next item there?
I mean, I think we hit a lot of the different points with that. I mean, yeah, I think CEOs are always getting paid more, and they're always looking out for their shareholders too, right? And if you look back at the Business Roundtable, which is an association of CEOs from the late 70s, right? They basically said, we only care about really serving our shareholders, right? And although they claim, because people are now starting to wake up to how fucked up this is, they claim to be like, okay, we care a little bit about, like, you know, the people too. Like, don't believe it. Like,
yeah,
so
absolutely.
Yeah, that's, I think, really
awesome. So I want to. We are coming to the lighter part of the episode. And what I wanted to do with this episode was talk about mainstream media's coverage, which we kind of dissected, and then talk about the ruling class reaction. This is one of the reactions, what we're talking about. Also with the guy with the hat is talking about all kind of crazy stuff. And then I wanted to end it with, there's, over 9 million jobs open. The last report, I think that was the June report, jobs report. 4 million people quit their jobs recently at the last time they calculated. Are we in a soft general strike? Is that what's happening right now? And can this so-called labor shortage snowball into a general strike? I'll start with you this time, Andrew. Those two questions: can this labor shortage snowball into a general strike? And would you classify 9 million job openings and 4 million people quitting as a soft sort of general strike? Andrew?
I think to get to your latter part of the question, absolutely. I mean, I think in some cases we are in sort of a passive general strike, right? People deciding not to go to work or not apply for these jobs is a passive general strike. And I think when you look at the news, I mean, even just where you are, even if you want to just look up locally what strikes are happening, there's probably something near you. A lot more strikes are happening close by. There's been a strike going on near me for this hospital in Central Mass right now. It's been going on for like 5 months, right? All these nurses who are protesting against unfair ratios from patient to nurses. That's been happening, and the hospital keeps trying to negotiate with them, and they keep saying no, right? So I think to answer it, it is happening here to a certain extent, and I think it will continue to be happening. I think it'll be interesting to see if things will be happening from industry to industry in a sense, right? And then if that will have any sort of effect on other industries being like, look, people are striking, we have to start raising our wages. But I think the biggest thing to even think about and take away is that, these bonus pays is, don't be satisfied with those bonus pays because they could be paying you so much more, right? So this is kind of their first step of like, okay, we'll give you a little bit more if you sign on, right? $1,000. As that guy said, we'll treat you like a baseball player because name me a baseball player that makes $1,000, but whatever. But anyway, so I think it's continuing to say, well, you've got the resources to give me a dignified life. I'm going to keep pushing, and eventually it'll happen. And I think mutual aid is a big thing. We got to get into that because for people who are striking. So that's what I have to say about that.
Oh no, your audio, Jay.
Agree with everything you said. Sorry, I have a cold, so I have to keep turning off my audio so you don't hear the coughing. And it is a cold. It's not the coronavirus. I've been got checked out. It's a cold, just a cough and a runny nose. So yeah. But yeah. As far as what I believe is, I think we are in sort of a soft general strike in a sense that people are intentionally holding out for better pay, for better conditions, for better jobs. So I'm always on board with that. As far as a general strike, I remember when we were talking when a general strike was really hot, I think during when George Floyd, the whole protest was going on with that. I remember somebody saying to achieve a successful general strike, we would only need about 16 million people striking. And that's why I'm bringing the question of, if we have 9 million jobs available and 4 million people quit their jobs, that's 13. We're only a hop, skip, and a jump from the numbers that, if I'm recalling correctly, somebody mentioned 16 million. But even if it's more than 16 million, let's say it's 20 million. Like, we're more than halfway there with the job openings and the resignations that we've recently had. And just look at what's happening with what is that? 13 million people not working. Just look at the reaction of the oligarch. Look at the reaction of the ruling class. They're doing incentives. Some of them are raising their rates a little bit. But just imagine if it was a coordinated general strike, this amount of people is out of work or not going to work, and add another 3 or 4, 5 million that's not going to work. We can make serious demands that they would have to do, because the economy for them is everything. Like, they'll make changes if they're going to lose money. But if people are losing their lives, they're like, whatever, things happen, life happens. But if they're losing money, if they're not making profits, if they're having to go out of business, then the oligarch, then the ruling class will make changes right away. And I just wonder if working people see the power, if they can see what's happening, what you're doing now is affecting some change. And if you did more, you can get a lot more change. I'm going to bring in Liv. So I want your reaction to the same sort of question, which is, are we currently in a soft general strike? And can this so-called labor shortage be snowballed into a full-blown general strike?
Well, I definitely think so. And I'm seeing in the comments, this is the first to my knowledge, that there's an October 15th general strike scheduled. Let's go. So that's great. Medicare for All March is July 24th. This is momentous. This is big. And I think, fuck fight for 15, fuck fight for 25, fuck Bernie. We make the numbers. We're the workers. We get to make the number. And this is the solidarity movement that not just workers, but BLM, the strike to stop the pipelines in the Native Americans' homeland, like all of this is a whole solidarity movement to declare that we need systemic change at every single American institution level. And that is what we are really in the midst of right now. We've seen people quitting their jobs. We need to get mutual aid going. Let's get this general strike. Let's do this right. Let's make demands and let's do this right.
Again, I did that again. Absolutely. So as far as that October 15th, let me see if I can find that comment here. If they have any details, we need to set up a mutual aid. Okay, here is a comment. One of the comments. Maybe there's more comments about it. We need to set up a mutual aid. General strike is scheduled for October 15th.
Yeah.
I did hear. I see some information about that. So we'll look into that, and we'll pass on that information to you perhaps in the next episode, or if the Fred Hampton leftists are talking about it tomorrow in the roundtable. But this is something definitely I feel like we have to push. At one point, I was even thinking not even calling it a general strike, just calling it a stay away from work, because it's the hardest thing about a general strike is getting people to stop going to work. But if you have 4 million people quit and 9 million people not going back, we're already there. So it's just stay home. Don't go back to work would be my strategy. So again, we have come to the end of this episode. I do want to thank Liv and Andrew for joining me today. Thank you. I'm sure my audience, or the audience for the FHL audience, you will see these two a lot more, especially on this show. But also check them out on the Populist Voice Network. They're both on the Intersection podcast, which kind of tries to talk about things from a perspective of how it intersects with other things. So if you're disabled, how does that intersect with the ability to get single payer healthcare, for example? And then there's the Independent Left, which Andrew's on with a couple of other people. And that one's also a very, very good podcast. Make sure you check both of them out. And at the end of our episodes, Andrew, what I like to do is just go around to my guests and just, briefly tell me if you have anything coming up. Tell me when your next episode's coming out. Tell me if you have a guest. What are you working on? Just anything you're doing outside of this. I'll start with you, Andrew. What do you got going on, if you got anything?
Yeah, so I think right now I'm actually helping out with the Medicare for All March in my area, which was great because I actually got to meet Savvy Sabs in person. And so, what
state are you in? Are you in her state?
Massachusetts,
Okay. I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm doing weekly episodes with the Populist Voice when it comes to Intersection and the Independent Left. That's kind of mostly what I have going on right now. Yeah, obviously you can check me out on Twitter as well, Radical Pragmat 1. You can find me.
What is your name? Can you give that handle out again so everybody can see?
Yeah, Radical Pragmat 1. Put it in the chat. Do I have access? Can I put it in the chat?
I was trying to see.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, you could put it in the chat for anybody that wants to follow you.
It's not letting me type in, but Liv, if you want to just, you follow. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And Liv, you were on last week, so you kind of know how this goes. Do you have anything going on? I did see after your last appearance last week, the Green Party of your state shouted you out. They were proud that you were representing them. But what do you have going on? Talk a little bit about whatever you're doing for our audience to know.
I am planning on going to the Medicare for All March on the 24th. With a bunch of fellow Green Party members. We actually have our own Margaret Flower speaking at the DC March. So we're very excited about that. I am very excited to hear that there is a general strike. I am planning on attending that. That's very exciting. And then I have the intersection with radical pragmatist Rutile and Novi. We're planning our next upcoming episode, and I am hella busy with dealing with Green Party shit and trying to reform this party to be a solid competitor of right, democratic, transparent, viable third party that we can be proud of. So working hard to try and make that happen.
Okay, there we go. Absolutely. So thank you again for both of you joining the live stream today. Now, what FHL has going on, I think tomorrow we're going to be talking about a bunch of different things. One of which is the Medicare for All march that's coming up, because a couple of the Friendhampton leftists are actually speaking. I believe JB, I believe Sabby, and I'm not sure if anyone else will be speaking in their relative in their respective states. So that's what's happening. We got our live stream at 1 p.m. PST or 4 p.m. Eastern. Not quite sure who will be on the show, but make sure you check us out tomorrow. As far as straight out of politics, got a bunch of different things in the works. I want it as a surprise, but you'll be very surprised when I do drop the idea I have coming for you. So special things in the works for straight out of politics. Last but not least, the series I'm doing on trauma and oppression. I look to do that periodically, where we're going to be addressing that, and that we're going to be doing another episode, I think, next week, possibly with Professor Zunkus or Zinkus on Twitter. Now, if you like the content on the Fred Hampton Leftist, make sure you support us on Ko-fi, Patreon. Make sure if you like this particular show, you can support me directly on Venmo. At Jay the Director. I am a director in my regular life outside of politics, and that's why the name. Outside of that, I want to thank you for joining the podcast. I also want to thank my two guest
Love
hosts
reading the comments.
one more time. And join us next week for another episode of Straight Out of Politics. Thanks, Liv, and thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.